You're listening to Theater and College Hoops. I am Thuby. Alongside me, we got Taylor Dammel, as always, here, uh, entering one of our last episodes of February. March right around the corner. I cannot wait. We are brought to you by Belly Up Media. Go download, subscribe, rate, and review us on whichever device it is that you use. Your college hooper of the day, I'm going to go with Vincent Council, former Providence College guard. PC man, yeah, Vincent Council. He was an all Big East team member, Taylor, for the 2011-2012 season. Made an all freshman team as well, averaged about 12, 6 assists, 4 boards. Not a bad player whatsoever. A good player for those first few years with Ed Cooley. So Vincent Council, he is your college hooper of the day. He had a few 25-point games, like 20-plus-point games. Let's not forget about Mr. Council there in Friartown. Check out the website at theaterandcollegehoops.com and make sure to follow me at CBB Theater to find out where the feet is. You should also follow Taylor at Taylor Dammel. Let's open the curtains. Taylor, what's going on, man? Always great to have you back. Can I start with gloating and just say that I won? Because you texted me earlier today saying that you finally laid your weapon down and you've conceded.
Oh, dude, it's something that I wanted to address publicly, so I'm glad we're getting right into this.
This is like you going up to the podium after a scandal is broken. It's like, what is Taylor gonna say?
It really is. Today, actually, specifically, I returned all of my DirecTV equipment to the store here, and I am officially a YouTube TV subscriber in a full capacity. Also switched my internet. Yeah. Mr. Daniel, why did you decide? You've been so adamant about. Yeah, right. Well, so here's the deal. Okay, Sue, and you know me quite well, obviously lived together for many years. And I would not be offended if you answered yes to this question, or not question, but statement. And that is, I have to be one of the least frugal people you've probably ever met in your life. Like,
You enjoy nice things. You enjoy things.
well, but I'm just not. I'm a convenience person, and so
Sure.
I generally will overpay for whatever, just because I'm not going to sit there and haggle over $7, right? But it's at this point where DirecTV was literally costing me like $280 a month, right? And I mean, it was getting to a point, and then my Cox Communications internet was costing me $130 a month, right? So we're $410 a month into this shit, right? So finally, I was like, okay, Verizon 5G internet for $40 a month, YouTube TV for $72 a month. Like, I mean, when you're talking about $300 a month in savings, like that's legit. So, my wife would say it's really nice of me to finally save some money. I just think that my DraftKings budget went up a little. Is how I'm looking at it, you know. So, and I will say, and hopefully we get a sponsorship out of this. I did have YouTube TV as like for Sunday Ticket this year, just because that was the only way. And I actually did, it was really neither here nor there. Now, there's still some things that I want to say that if there wasn't literally like $300 delta between these two, like my preference would still be to have DirecTV. Okay,
Sure.
the wired situation. But the other problem is now is like I feel like my cable and internet went out just as much over the last 6 months or year as anyone's streaming platforms have. So, yeah, it happened. It happened, man. So I'm here. I'm with you now. I'm a YouTube TV and I'm not sure how I feel about this, considering
It
how
feels good that you're on the team. I get it.
But I
But
will say
it's
that
mature of you. It's mature of you to have made that switch.
I will say that my anti-streaming seed was really planted before things like YouTube TV came around, right? Like
Yes.
YouTube TV is a legit service, right? Here, look at me backtracking, right, like this. But I did not have contractual relations with that. That streaming service. Yeah. No, but YouTube TV is like literally the same thing. So I will say that, back in the day, what I meant by that was like, I'm not coming over to your Super Bowl party to watch this shit on Fubo TV or whatever from 5 years ago. So YouTube TV at least seems to be legit. And here I go. So, may I admit something else publicly here as well? It's a secondary
I might,
statement. No, I,
or
I,
you
I have a
might.
second. I have a secondary
Let's
statement.
hear
The
it.
press conference
Wow.
isn't over yet. So today, as we're recording this, is my daughter's 6 months. We're not going to call it a birthday, but whatever. She's 6 months ago today. She came into the world
Beautiful.
for 6 months, right? And so let me just say, being a dad is awesome. It's been the coolest thing. Love it. Can't wait. Can't wait for that. But that also means that for 6 months, I've been doing the same shit every day, right? Tomorrow, my wife and daughter are going to visit her sister in California, which means for the first time in 6 months, your boy has the house to himself. And I already have a tea time scheduled. I might go to the casino with my buddy. Like I got a happy hour on the schedule. I got a lunch situation. I'm like, I am maxing out this 24 hours of house to myself here. So that's the other thing I want to publicly state, just in case there's any debate from anyone listening, potentially behind me right now, and that is being a dad is my favorite thing that I've ever done in my life. But I'm also super fired up to have the house to myself for the first time in at least over half a year,
Yeah.
So that's
I mean,
going to be huge.
You're on record, so Danielle doesn't actually have to listen to you or hear you. You are on record, so we can play this. But look, my only issue that I have, Taylor, is that you have the house to yourself and you're not going to be in it. You got tea, and that's fine. Spend it however you want to spend it. But you're talking about tea times, lunches, happy hours, things of that nature. Man, I would be walking around naked in the house. That's how I would spend it.
Well, I'm thinking my plan is lunch, maybe nap, okay,
All right.
then happy hour, maybe nap again. My tea time is actually a nighttime tea time at a place called Grass Clippings here, the first fully lit golf course in Arizona. So that's something that you can't really do with a kid is go play night golf.
Right.
And then they don't
I
come
mean,
back
look,
to like
spend it how you want to spend it.
They don't come back till like 6 p.m. the next day, so I got a whole another like almost full day. So don't worry, I'll be at home comfortable, watching
All
some
right.
basketball and whatnot.
I just want you
yeah.
to make sure, leverage this time, enjoy this time alone. There's absolutely nothing better than that. I'm sure you're going to miss them, obviously, but anyone who knows about having 24 to 48 hours by yourself, that's when you run the motion offense. That's when I run the motion offense, which is like grab a frozen pizza, some chips, some Zins or dip, 30 rack of beer, and you just watch college basketball. I kind of do wish it coincided for you on a insane ass to ass jam packed college basketball Saturday, but Tuesday will be just fine. The only
Super
other
Tuesday is
thing
going to work fine for me, I guess, at this point. So
the only other thing I would say regarding YouTube TV before we get into actual college basketball is I'm glad you referenced the delta in what you're paying, because that was a huge deciding factor for me as well. And by the way, we had this conversation this year, like this college basketball season, and it's crazy how time flies. But we had that conversation this exact year. The previous streaming services like ESPN Plus and logging on and navigating and things like that, that was a pain in the ass. It is very seamless for YouTube TV. And while there aren't necessarily channel numbers, or you can't not a voice activated remote, you have everything you need in the top once you set your favorites. But yeah, man, I try and tell people this. I'm like, look, if the price you're paying for internet and cable isn't that bad, I sure, go ahead and stay with your internet and cable. But I can tell you right now that what did I have prior to YouTube TV? Wasn't Comcast. I think it was Xfinity. I had Xfinity, and the lag, like I was getting texts 5 seconds before something actually happened. So it's not as if cable is 100% up to speed either, which I know a lot of people worry about. But there was a lag with Xfinity. I was paying out my ass for that. The service wasn't that great. Sometimes my cable would shit out. Like it was such an obvious slam dunk, and I'm so happy that you're with me now, and you're going to be able to enjoy the quad box. That's the best part. Like it is
Mhm.
it's perfect timing as it relates to college basketball and conference tournaments and the NCAA tournament. I can't wait for that.
So I'm glad you brought up the lag, and I'll just say one more thing here. I think sports betting being legal in Arizona actually helped me make this transition because cable's behind when you're trying to live bet on sports. It's cable's still behind what's currently happening anyway, right? So that was always my thing where I'm like, well, I don't want to lag where I'm like, whatever behind you're trying to live bet on a game. Well, if the lag for cable's 4 seconds and the lag for YouTube TV 6 seconds, like their actual lag from the game is like 30 seconds, right? So that's why it's tough to live sports bet sometimes because you'll open up the DraftKings app and you'll see the score is not what it's on the screen. It's already a play ahead. And so
Yeah.
it's already ruined it for you anyway, if that's what you're doing. So it's kind of like, well, shit, I'm already ruining this anyway. What does it matter now at this point if there's a 2 second difference, So
Is that lag worth $300, 250
no,
bucks
no,
on a
no.
monthly
So actually,
basis? It's
this is
really not.
actually I'm glad we're having this open discussion because I haven't discussed this verbally with anybody yet. And now I'm going to say, listen, hon, my sports betting actually helped us save money on. This is great. I'm noting this all down right now. So yeah, so the sports betting part helping me make fiscally responsible decisions.
Yeah. So last week, Taylor, I said I think it might have been a lane violation, but it was one of the segments in closing out the episode. It was a commentary on how folks are talking about banning the handshake line because there was a huge brawl in the Southland between Incarnate Word and someone else that I'm blanking on. But there was a huge brawl in the Southland, right? And so people were talking about banning the handshake line, and I was saying, look, do whatever you want. The handshake line doesn't move me all that much. I can do with or without it. I don't care. It's honestly, I might ruffle some feathers here. It's kind of like the Pledge of Allegiance before games, like either do it or don't. I really don't care. Like it's a nice gesture, but I do not care. Uh, but I was basically saying that because as fans on the couch and viewing, I switch channels, right? The second triple zeros hits, it's over. So Wake and Duke, the second triple zeros hits, I was close to switching over. I had my finger on the remote, which is just, by the way, with YouTube TV, one to the right, one down, one left, whichever one you want in your quad box. But I was very close to getting out of there until I saw the court storm, which fine, but really until I saw Kyle Filipowski come up injured and lame, and there were a bunch of Duke staffers trying to come to his rescue and get him off the court. So let me start with this, Taylor. This is the topic everyone's discussing this week. Let me start with this. I hate, we pride ourselves, Taylor. I think we do a good job of highlighting things that aren't talked about. We talk about mid majors, right? I think we do a good job of talking about top 25 teams that some don't talk about or identify or even gas up. Like every single week, it seems like folks are talking about UConn or Purdue or Tennessee or maybe Arizona. Like I think we do a good job of veering from that. But Taylor, I just want to preface this by saying it kind of pains me that, of course, we're going with the grain here and talking about court storming, but this is an NBA guy that we're talking about, the face of a brand program in Duke who got hurt because of fans, and this is stuff that's been bubbling up. So I want to apologize for not going against the grain and being unique, but I think we had to talk about this. Let me bring you in, Taylor. Your thoughts on what transpired in Winston-Salem and how we move forward as it relates to court storming.
I've been trying over the last couple of days. I've been trying to figure out kind of like a path of how I feel about this, without just having a bunch of random thoughts, kind of as per usual. Unfortunately, I kind of have a lot of random thoughts just on it, and so I guess we'll see if we can weave this into one thing here. Um, let's start with it's a bigger deal. People are making it a big deal because it's Duke for sure, and I'm not trying to say that it's not a big deal, but people are definitely talking about it more because it's Duke, and it wouldn't even probably matter if it was Flip. Like it does matter that it's Flip, but I think it happening to Duke and the best player on Duke has more impact than say if it would happen to the best player on Alcorn State, right? Like obviously, even compared to like Iowa State, another team that's in the similar rankings right now, right? I don't think people would have cared as much if it was that. I'm also seeing people take this to a very extreme level of, like, Jay Billis today said that he thinks people should get arrested, and it's like, okay, let's maybe take a step back. That seems like a Monday morning quarterback overreaction situation here, because it's not like people are out there, for the most part, in what I've seen, generally people aren't trying to intentionally hurt anybody, which makes to my next point. Flip said he thought it was intentional. I don't think this was intentional, and so I think, I mean, I'm not Flip. I'm absolutely not going to bang on by any means, because he's the victim, so to speak, in all this. But I actually don't think it was. I don't think it was intentional. It'd be a really hard thing to time up for a non-athlete sitting in the crowd to try and to try and hit this guy over the middle, right in the perfect spot of the knee. I think that was probably a little bit overblown. Now, going the other direction, we are fans of a team that has never rushed the court ever. I mean, I think the last time it happened was that UCLA game with Salim or something that I think Arizona beat number 1 UCLA and they were number 3, whatever. It was a
I don't even
monumental type
remember
of
it.
game. Right, exactly. It was 20 plus years ago, if that's when it happened. Or maybe there was one other game when Stanford was number 1 with the Lopez twins. But that was, again, 20 plus years ago, right? So generally, just like a Duke or Kansas or any, we're fans of a team that doesn't rush court. We only get rushed generally once or twice a year, right? Is kind of how it plays out. Just like any of these schools that are the topic of discussion. So that's an interesting thing to talk about here. There's literally only like 15 schools in the country probably that have this issue regularly. And we don't need to name all those 15 because it's the 15 that you would assume, right? So that's an interesting part of this discussion, where you got 345 teams, give or take, that would love to rush the court, and about 15 teams who are like, we can't do this 10 times a year. And so, but we have talked about this before, especially as it relates to going to schools like an Oregon State or, places like that over the year, where if the crowd isn't taken care of, it can get a little hairy. I know there were a couple of experiences when Sean Miller was Arizona's coach that were not great with court storming. So, I mean, I would hate to see, I don't know, I'd hate to see it banned, but it is something that I think is a little overused now. Back in the day, it was kind of a fun thing where a complete underdog beats, the number 1 team in the country. Like, Wake was favored by 3 points in that game. And I'm not trying to say it wasn't a big win for Wake, but like, Wake isn't the Sisters of the Poor, like, from a basketball standpoint. They were favored in that game. So it's kind of like singing the nah, nah, hey, hey, goodbye, or overrated chant. It kind of is that same stuff, where to me, it's like, we're way overusing this stuff that used to be like really a special moment. So I guess I would hate to see it banned. I would understand it, I think, at this point. The real answer is better crowd control. But the
Yeah.
suggestion of people, hey, well, let's just wait for 30 seconds and then let everybody rush the court. Well, that's nothing more anticlimactic than that. Like, that's not going to work, because then it's like, well, let's all just walk onto the court and the joy of it is hitting the court right when 0-0-0 hits, right? So the answer is better crowd control, but I don't think that's a realistic thing that could happen at every arena in the United States. So I know that's not a conclusion. That's just like 8 random thoughts, but I'm not sure. I'm not even sure where I fall on if it should be banned. And the problem with college basketball compared to like just NBA arenas, not that this would ever happen in an NBA arena, but every NBA arena is essentially the same exact thing, right? There's 30 arenas that are all the same thing, in terms of like where the players are sitting, where you enter the locker rooms, all that type of stuff. Every college basketball court is completely random. I mean,
Mhm.
you got tunnels on one side, tunnels on another. The benches are on one side. Vanderbilt, the benches are behind the damn basket. I mean, that is going to be a really tough thing to regulate in college basketball, because each individual court is so different from every other court, which is not the same pretty much across other sports, I would say, to the same way that college basketball is. So that's going to be the tough part if we say, hey, you can rush the court, but there's got to be rules and regulations to this. Well, the rules and regulations at Vanderbilt just aren't going to be the same as they are at Maryland, which aren't going to be the same as they are at Wake Forest, because all the arenas are so different. So is going to be the toughest part to legislate, I think, of this whole deal.
Yeah, it's just a sensitive conversation, not because it's sensitive in the sense of talking politics or social commentary or anything like that. It's just I can kind of see both sides. So let me start with this and unpacking what I saw with Filipowski. First of all, let me start with everyone saying Filipowski initiated or hit the player the guy first and like this was retribution, this is karma. You are so beyond dumb and gone. Like even if you bleed black and gold like a Wake Forest fan, you are so simple minded and brain dead, straight up. Like Kyle Filipowski, these guys are analyzing Kyle Filipowski walking off the court like the Zapruder film. First of all, Kyle Filipowski is not a normal sized human being. So when you say he reached his leg out, that's probably a regular ass step for Kyle freaking Filipowski, who's damn near 7 foot, not your pudgy ass who's like 5'9" and can barely get up the sidewalk without breathing heavy. All right. It probably takes you 500 steps to go up like one block. So let's start there. All right. Enough blaming Kyle Filipowski and saying that he initiated this. I'm sure Kyle Filipowski is saying to himself, let me pick a fight with like a bunch of stampeding rhinos at me. All right. Like I'm sure that's a very logical thing for Kyle Filipowski to say. Now, to your point about him saying he got targeted, I disagree with him there. He's probably feeling a bit emotional and he's probably hating on Wake Forest. Like it has not been a good year as it relates to feeling disrespected if you're a Duke guy, right? Kyle Filipowski talked about Blake Hinson getting up on the table when Pitt beat Duke. This just happened to him. So I think they're feeling a type of way for real. Like I don't think they're feeling very respected. That's what happens when you lose. But to say that Kyle Filipowski started this, like seriously, please leave it at the door. I understand fandom, but I cannot deal with stupidity. Let's start there. But number two, the Jay Billis thing, arresting people. I don't even mind Jay Billis that much, but that was absurd. That went way too far. You can't like feasibly, you can't do that. But also, I don't think the person that injured Filipowski was doing it on purpose. Now that's the issue though, Taylor. Like that's what I keep getting back to is that I'm not a big sweeping change kind of guy. When the FBI stuff happened in 2017, I was just like, okay, whatever, just wait, just wait, just wait. And we were eventually proven correct that this was a nothing situation. This, though, I genuinely think like it wouldn't surprise me if we saw a sweeping change sometime soon. And there are a lot of different arenas and variables that it's tough to blanket cover everything. But when you have a NBA player, like Kyle Filipowski is not just a good college basketball player. He's a potential lottery pick playing for the Duke Blue Devils, arguably the biggest brand in college basketball. When that happens, yes, attention should be paid. And I'm just going to live in reality, folks. You mentioned it a little bit, but living in reality, when that happens to that guy on that team, changes might have to be made because that is a player for a team that is this injury is going to potentially impact their season. And that like if you're the commissioner of the ACC or if you're a college basketball fan, Duke's performance, Kyle Filipowski's performance cannot full stop cannot be impacted by the fans. It cannot happen. And I understand that rushing the court is part of college basketball. That's college basketball fandom, and that's great. I love that we can preserve it if we can preserve it. But at the end of the day, he cannot get hurt. That team cannot suffer because of a fan. So you have to figure out a way. And that's not our job, Taylor. Like I hate when people are like podcasters or people with pundits, like, what's your what's your excuse or what's your solution? Brother, I am not getting paid like the folks that are getting paid to make this solution. Okay. Like this, you have to get in the lab and figure it out. And if it does mean banning court storms, I'll survive. It sucks, but I will survive. It would also banning court storms, by the way, would eliminate some terrible gestures and like vitriolic folks. Like people forget and didn't see, but Mark Mitchell, a Wake fan, went up to him with like the double birds. And I love all the hardos being like, oh no, like sticks and stones, or it's just a gesture. You go on the court that close with someone giving you the birds, like those are ill intent. Like those are ill intentions, is what I should say. I guess the point that I'm making, Taylor, is I'd like to see a nuanced solution to this. I don't want them to completely ban court storms. I'd like to see what Creighton did, which was rope off UConn and get them off the floor. And I guess you can blame John Shire and say you got to get your guys off the court a little quicker than that. But that's not their job. Like, imagine being a coach, dude. Imagine being a coach talking about lineups and talking about scenarios and talking about substitution patterns. And then part of that is, oh, well, if we're down 4 with 2 seconds left, I got to sub this guy off because he might get his ankle rolled up. Like, do you hear yourself, people, when you're blaming John Shire to be like, everyone else gets their guys off the court? Yeah, I suppose if the deficit is 16 with 3 seconds left, sure. Duke was down what, like 4 or 5? Like, you don't know what they were down 4. Like, this is not part of what you sign up for as a coach or as a player. Like, so I understand why people are getting a little upset when they say players or fans should not be on the court. I don't think they should be either. I don't think they should be that close to players. So we have to figure out a way. And it's not going to shock me, Taylor. Again, I'm not a big sweeping generalization guy, like a overhaul, but Kyle Filipowski, Duke, this might be the perfect storm for some serious changes coming up.
So am I off base with this comp? Is this going to be our college basketball version of like maybe like the targeting rule or like roughing the passer in the NFL, where finally it took some major player to get hurt, right? And it's going to be something that we maybe all disagree with in the wide scale of things, but at the same time we understand that like player safety is what is now the key to this. That's kind of my comp, I think, is like targeting and roughing the passer. Now it gets called all the time. 10 years ago, we were used to everybody getting lit up, but you get too many injuries, all that type of stuff has to change. And it's affected my team a lot. It's affected everybody's team a lot, generally negatively. Almost nobody ever thinks it affects them positively, right? It's always a negative effect. So, maybe that's a good comp for how we're going to have to deal with. It's not in practice the same, right? I understand it's during the game. I'm just talking about the feeling of this is it's going to be something that's going to suck to see happen, but we're just going to have to understand it because it's a player safety thing. I think that's off the top of my head. That's a comp I can come up with for this. And what you said with Creighton is kind of the point that I'm making. And you said it too, is that, yeah, they were able to cordon them off and get them off the court. But what about like at Michigan State, where the students are literally behind the bench? There's nothing you can do about that. Not that Michigan State's a court rushing team, but just as an example, that well, maybe they are this year actually, but yeah, but yeah, it's just gonna be hard to legislate. I think that at the end of the day, that's probably what we're gonna see though. Is this going to be some kind of banishment? And the thing is, too, is like when people are like, oh, we'll just give the team a tech. Well, the kids in the crowd don't give a shit about that, Yep. I will also say this about how people look at student sections, right? People look at basketball student sections and think it's the same thing as a football student section. They are not the same thing. They're absolutely not the same thing. Because I saw this comment 10, 20 times over the last couple of days. You get all these blacked out, hammered students at a basketball game. And I'm like, no. Okay. Football, yes. Football, 80% of the students are hammered, right? I would say, at least heading into the arena, right? Basketball is not. I mean, there are those people, don't get me wrong, but it is not the same student section that's at a football game. Am I wrong with that? I think
no, because like if you're not tailgating on a Thursday for a 9 p.m. tip for the most part. Like maybe Saturday. I don't know.
10 basketball games that I would consider myself to have been like.
Well, because like football games are once a week and they're an event. You only have half of those at home.
Football, I wasn't sober at a single football game, right? Yeah. But I mean, basketball, it was kind of like okay, and by drinking, I meant like we would go to a bar beforehand, have like 6 beers and go to the game, not we chugged a handle of vodka and then brought a handle of Fireball into the student section. Like it's happening. Don't get me wrong, but it's not even nearly to the same degree as football student sections are. So I think that's been a good example this week to show that like the media doesn't quite understand how this is all working in here. So that's one thing I just wanted to point out where it's like, okay, all these Wake kids, sure, some of them were drunk, but we're also talking about like probably 3 hours since they consumed any beverage of any kind, right? Too.
Yeah.
But just wanted to throw that out there that I don't think this is a drunken decision that the student section is making to go do this, right? This is not that. So that's not I don't even think that's a factor in this discussion is the level of sobriety of the student section for this type of stuff.
The whole issue is just the layout of a football stadium versus a basketball stadium. Like a basketball stadium is that's it. Like, but you can't change that, right? Like you're not going to change that. But that, I mean, that's the whole purpose and whole issue of it. I guess my last point on this, Taylor, is if I were to fall anywhere, I'm always going to fall on the side of the players. And so it's amazing to me. It's fascinating to me to see grown men be like, damn it, the sanctity of court storming and court rushing needs to be held just because Kyle Filipowski of Duke got hurt and Caitlin Clark of Iowa got hurt. We can't get rid of it. And I'm over here like, dog, let me tell you something. Yes, you absolutely can, because Caitlin Clark's one of the greatest to ever do it. Kyle Filipowski is one of the best players in the country right now. Like, I do not care about courts. I don't need to see court storming more than I need to see Caitlin Clark and Kyle Filipowski. Like, if you told me I have to live in a world where nobody can touch the court, no fan can touch the court, but I get to see Caitlin Clark in the NCAA tournament and I get to see Kyle Filipowski for Duke in the NCAA tournament, I think you're an absolute moron and you hate the sport. I would even go so far as to say that you don't like college basketball if you don't want to see those two just because you get to court storm. Court storming ain't that important. That's all I'm saying.
Yep, and I think I haven't done the math in terms of the research on this, but it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out in terms of like there are definitely 15 teams in the country who are totally fine with no court storming ever happening again because they don't do it anyway, you know. And so that'll be interesting to see how like okay, so once out of every 10 years you get to beat Duke and rest the court. Like you probably not even be in college and have this opportunity that most likely, you know. So it's almost like people are arguing over the idea that they hope to have this chance when in reality you don't even really get this chance that often. So you're not, we think of it because we see it as highlights like once or twice a weekend, but when you consider there's 180 basketball games a weekend and we see it once or twice a weekend, like it's really not affecting that many people. You know, football I think is like you said, a whole different thing. I don't really think there's nearly as much of a fear for all of this happening in a football standpoint, simply because this section is generally behind their own team's bench, and you know the entrance to the other team's locker room is on the other side. Like there's way more space to make this all happen. But so I'm not saying that this rule should apply to everything. Maybe that's what they'll do just to kind of curtail all of it. But yeah, I think that at the end of the day, I'm kind of with you. I think that they'll probably do something a little drastic to make sure this doesn't happen. Because yeah, I mean, it's easy to say, not, you know, one more point is it's easy to say when it's not your team, right? Yeah. But if the best player on your team got hurt yesterday, you were like, no, court storming, let's do it. And then your best player gets hurt. You'd be like, I can't believe they're still allowing this shit, you know? So everybody's got to make sure they stay. Everybody's got to make sure they kind of stay in their lane of or have that same energy of saying, okay, if it was your best player, you have to think about the same way as if it was your rival's best player too.
Dude, I would be fuming if I was a Duke fan right now trying to figure out how long Kyle Filipowski's out, if he is out. Hopefully he's not, but I would be livid. And like that's what, and again, that's why you got people from Wake being like, oh, he did it on purpose. It's like, can you grow up for 2 seconds? And I also love the only other thing I love about placing blame on Kyle Filipowski, guy just goes 40 minutes of absolute hellacious basketball on the road. And yeah, what he wants to do is pick a fight. We're blaming Kyle Filipowski after pouring all of his energy and focus and attention into that basketball game. But now we need him to stick and move like Michael freaking Jackson when the running of the Bulls is coming at him. Get real, people, you absolute morons. Like it's some of this is just so disingenuous. But you know what the worst part is? You guys got me out here defending Duke. All year I've had to defend Duke from being underrated, which they have been. They're a top 10 team. and now I'm defending like John Shire, who I thought was great in his press conference, trying to focus the attention on Wake Forest, who, by the way, won. Great win for them. But I'm over here defending Duke all year, man, and it's disgusting.
It's amazing what happens when Coach K leaves. But yeah, it is funny where you 50-year-olds with road rage complaining that a 19-year-old on a basketball court with 1,000 people running at him can't keep contained, even though this dude just flipped a guy off at the intersection on the way home. It's kind of like, come on, like have some self-awareness here of what we're arguing over here.
Nobody has any of that. So, but that's it. Again, I'm sorry we had to add our 1,000th commentary, which I'm sure you've seen or heard, listener, on this, but had to be addressed. Taylor, let's pivot quickly now to Baylor. Can I tell you something, man? I don't have a grip on Baylor, and it's not one of those deals where I'm like, I can't tell if they're good or bad. Like, they're obviously good. They're good. But the question is, are they elite? Right? So my internal monologue here, Taylor, is are they really good or are they elite? And I think I have to say that they're just really good. They're 14th in KenPom, 16 in the net. You look at their Q1 results, they're 5-8, right? They're 5-8 against Q1 opponents, and those 5 have come down to Auburn, who have struggled a bit here and there. Florida is not the same team they were earlier on in the season. BYU, who I don't know if a lot of folks are buying, UCF at home apparently is a Q1 win. And I think a lot of people say that's what's wrong with the net. But UCF at home, and then Iowa State, hell of a win. I can't poke holes in that Iowa State win for Baylor. But those are their wins. Auburn, Florida, BYU, UCF, and Iowa State. Their losses, Taylor, have come to Michigan State, which is straight up a potentially bad loss for them. Duke, who's a top 10 team. They've lost to Kansas State, which is another bad loss. Texas, which could arguably be a bad loss. Like Texas, Kansas State, MSU, they're all bubble teams. So is TCU. They've lost to Kansas, also BYU, and then, of course, Houston. And so what brought me to this, Taylor, is looking at that Houston game in the first half, they looked, I don't want to say they looked terrible, just looked like Houston was a clearly superior team. And then we saw them force overtime, and it was a great finish. So all of this to say, Taylor, I think they're just a really good team. I think they're a Sweet 16 type of team, like a second weekend team. But once they hit that quality opponent, a top 2 seed, I think that's when the road ends for Baylor because they have such an incredible offense, but no defense. They're barely in the top 100 of defense per Evan Miyakawa. Where do you stand on Baylor as it relates to pretty dang good versus elite?
I think you kind of have to have similar thoughts on Baylor, however you think about Kentucky. They're both in the top 10 offensively, and they're both outside of like the top 80 defensively. I know their schedules haven't been the same, but they kind of have super similar feels to them, at least for me, where it's like, okay, this team can get streaky enough to score 90 like 5 games in a row and go to a Final Four. But they also aren't good enough defensively where they might give up 90 to a 12 seed in the first round and get run out. And so that's my problem. I think both teams are better than that. I'm just saying that's how bad both of these teams are defensively. I will say this though, and this is more of a commentary on college basketball and how we view it, and just maybe even sports in general. If we're going to get really deep, are we having this exact discussion if that guy just makes one free throw to end the game?
That's a good point. Eves Missy,
right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right? I mean, our Houston would be the number 4 or 5 team in the country, probably 4, maybe right now. Baylor would probably be 7 or 8, and we'd be saying, "Wow, this Baylor team is dope because they just beat Houston." So I mean, I know that this is a wider discussion than just that. So I just don't want to make too many sweeping discussions just because if one dude makes one free throw, we're having this is not our topic of discussion today. And I know that it's game of inches, make or miss league, whatever, all the bullshit everybody wants to say. But I because of that, I maybe would think of them a little better. Like that game didn't not impress me. Like the fact that they came back against Houston, which has got to be one of the, if not the singular hardest thing to do in the country, is come back on the best defensive team in the country. But I think Baylor is, I think you're on with with it. They're probably going to be like a 4 seed, and deservedly so. I mean, nobody's going to look at their losses and think they're bad losses though, because the teams that they lost to are name schools.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, even rankings and everything show that they're all having down years. You would never say in any year that, oh man, losing to Texas, Michigan State, whatever, are bad losses, right? And I think that even though the numbers are going to say that, the minds of people just aren't going to allow them to convince themselves that those are bad losses. So I think they'll probably get a little benefit of the doubt as it relates to like the selection committee going into the tournament, because those numbers, or the numbers, say something that the names don't say. It is hard to get a feel for this team. I still would say that their loss impressed me more than it negatively affected how I view Baylor. So I still think of them as good or better than I did maybe a week ago. I know it was at home, but whatever. I just don't want to put that such any too much of a sweeping idea over the fact that if the one guy hits a free throw, we're talking about, hey, can Baylor get to a 2 seed? I know it's 1 point. It can make that big of a difference. So I don't want to say that just one free throw is the difference between us not knowing if they're good or not, or then saying, oh man, this team could be a 2 seed in the tournament.
Yeah. This game really just perplexed me, man, because I would say, I mean, it's, your point about the free throw is very well taken, and I can appreciate that. But I would say through 40 minutes, it was an even game. Like that game deserved overtime. Houston was that much better in the first half. Baylor was that much better in the second half. Credit to both teams. And then what happened in overtime? Houston just pulled away. Like they just grinded them to death. And you're right. Game of inches. Missy hits that shot or hits that free throw. Who knows what we're discussing here? But they're good enough to hang with Houston in 20 minutes for sure. But I understand Houston's great, but they were down like 16 in the first half. And so when you come out with that lack of focus and you don't eventually end up getting the job done against the likes of a Houston or a Kansas, that's when I personally think like, yeah, you're going to win games on offense. They might win a Sweet 16 game based on offense. Like I'm erring on the side of, and this has changed, Taylor, in terms of how I pick teams, but you got to be able to score to advance in the tournament. Baylor can absolutely do that. I'm not as worried about Baylor's defense as I am like Kentucky's defense, but I just don't think Baylor has the chops, and I don't know this season if they're able to defeat an elite team, which is what they're going to have to face in the Sweet 16. And so they're like, it's just so weird. I feel like I haven't had this internal discussion, Taylor, in a long time about a team, about that delta or that plateau or that difference of, damn, you're really freaking good, which is the worst Baylor is. The worst Baylor, the worst I view Baylor is really, really damn good. But I don't know if they're elite. Like, I don't know if I can put them in a top 5.
Give me like a Baylor Alabama Sweet 16 game. Just offense out the ass.
Yeah, yes.
No defense. Because if you look at Alabama too, that they're similar in terms of their rankings as Kentucky. So there's, if you look at the top 10 of offensive efficiency, the 3 worst teams of that top 10 defense are Alabama at 97, Baylor at 85, and Kentucky at 77. So, I mean, kind of similar. I think Bama's maybe better than those other 2 teams just because they're arguably the best offensive team in the country by a lot of metrics. But yeah, give me 2 of those teams matching up in like a Sweet 16 game, because that would just be absolute track meet. 150 plus shots put up in that game. That would be an awesome matchup. Just no defense to be found. Just 35 threes each team is putting up. I'd love that.
I'm picturing like Iron Eagle or Spiro Didi's just going insane. Maybe it's a Harlan game. Like I'm totally with you, Taylor. Those are a couple tournament teams in Bama and Baylor. Let's talk about another tournament team. And I think they really solidified their spot this past weekend, and that's Washington State. I've been banging on the drum, man, the last couple weeks. And even last week, we highlighted them just a bit because they came into the top 25. Last week, I think they were at 21. What did you make of their weekend there for the Cougars in the desert? Because they had an unbelievable win in Tucson, dropped a terrible loss then in Tempe on Saturday. But I think they really they really put the nation on notice. If you were freaking awake, of course, the Pac-12 had to tip that game at 11 p.m. Eastern on Thursday between the Cougs and Wildcats, two best teams in the Pac-12. Idiots. But what did you take away from the Cougars this weekend?
God, there's still every week I still have an example of why I can't wait to be done with the Pac-12, and this week provided me multiple examples, both regarding Washington State. So let me just start there before I get to Washington State. Let me complain before I praise here. Yeah, so of course, typical Pac-12, the two best teams, which we've known they're the two best teams for more than like a couple days. Like this game could have been a 7 p.m. type of game with easily. You own the network. Just move the time, So that's one thing. And then the second thing I'm so tired of in the Pac-12 is, and I'm going to sound biased, but Sub, I think you'll back me up on this. I know most people who listen to this don't pay attention to this nearly as much as we do, right? The Pac-12 works in a way where you travel with your in-state travel partner, right? So when Washington and Washington State come to Arizona, they flip-flop playing ASU and U of A, right? So ASU has benefited. I can't even explain how much they've benefited from being in the same state as the University of Arizona basketball team, because Washington State beating Arizona at Arizona was literally their biggest game they've had win in 10 years, maybe more, 15 years, right? That's their Super Bowl, right? So we see this all the time. And then what happens? It was so predictable they were going to lose to ASU the next night, because we see this happen all the time. They just finished their game at 2 a.m. in Tucson, right? Just a battle of a game against a top 5 team in the country. And then they have to go on the road again 24 hours later, 36 hours later, and they're riding high and overlooking ASU, and this happens all the time. So I know everyone listening to this is like, "Oh yeah, of course you'd say that about ASU." But Subha, I don't think I'm wrong with this. We've seen this happen. We see this happen all the time. So I'm excited that the travel system when Arizona goes to the Big 12 next year is not going to be that. And Arizona State probably picks up 2 or 3 conference wins per year because of this exact situation. So yeah. So before I pass it back to you, because of that, I'm going to give Wazzu a little bit of the benefit of the doubt in losing to ASU, because I have seen this happen. We've seen this happen every single year. It happens all the time. It's happened to Oregon when Oregon was going to the Final Four. It's happened to UCLA when they were the number 1, number 2, number 3 team in the country. It's happened to Stanford when they were the number 1 team in the country years ago. We've seen this happen to very, very good teams, much better teams than even Wazzu is right now. So I'll give them a little bit benefit of the doubt. They brought this up on the broadcast a lot, and now it's going to be the thing we hear about Wazzu for the rest of the season, because now they're going to get some shine, is that they're the tallest team in the country.
Yep.
And against U of A specifically, that's a great matchup for them, because U of A has size as well, but Wazoo is even bigger than them at the guard position. So Arizona couldn't necessarily out quick them, because we have some bigger guys. Arizona has some bigger guys. Whereas like ASU, they don't have any bigs that are worth a damn. So they just play small ball the whole time. And I could see that working against Wazoo. I've been very impressed with Wazoo. You have been the bus driver on this for sure. They just hit tough shots. They play good defense. I mean, there were a couple shots they hit that were they weren't crazy shots. They were just, you have to be an elevated level of basketball team to play, to score on some of the possessions they did. Their win in Tucson was not fluky. You could say that maybe the last play getting a 4-point play, that was, I don't want to call it fluky. I don't want to say that it's lucky. You're certainly not going to see it a lot.
It was a little lucky.
You're not going to see it a lot for sure. Off a broken
play. They created that luck. It's okay.
No, and you got to listen. You got to make the shot. We just said Baylor
for sure
didn't make the free throw, and so I mean, we can't take credit and give credit. What I'm saying. We got to give credit when it's due here. So they did make the shot. So I don't think there's anything fluky about Wazoo. I think they're probably going to be a team in the tournament that most people are going to pick as an upset pick, but I'm probably going to take them a little further. It's just simply because we've watched them more, and I think they are a legitimately good basketball program. I think they're a well-coached basketball team. And what I like about them is, of course, our boy, Coach Harden, as well, who I'll let you talk about his great weekend that he had there in Tucson. But I think they're a well-coached team, and I love, and when we talked to Coach Harden earlier this year, he made the point of, they've allowed, Kyle Smith to build a program and not cut bait with him after 2 years or 3 years or whatever. And now he's been there for how many years? 4 or 5?
4 or 5.
Yeah, right. And he's clearly built a high quality basketball team. They're not going to win the national championship. They're not going to a Final Four, whatever, knock on wood or whatever, but they are certainly a viable basketball program. They are certainly one that is going to make the tournament quite easily now this year, and one that I think will make some noise in the tournament just because they will be, with the right matchups, they will be a matchup nightmare for a number of teams in the country.
Top 30 defensive team, top 60 offensive team, top 60 offensive. That's not amazing, but it's not so bad where it can get you beat. Like those metrics, those numbers, those rankings can get you to a second weekend, which would be monstrous, absolutely monstrous for the fine folks of Pullman, right? Those metrics, like you had mentioned, aren't going to get you to the Final Four or the national title game, but they will grind you out. Every single possession is a battle against these dudes. You talk about their height, but their strength is so good too. Oscar Kloof, Ruben Chinyelu, who was tremendous on Thursday as a freshman, and then Isaac Jones, right? So they had so many great contributors. So I'll start, I guess, with Jalen Wells, man, 27. That guy had the game of his life. What a game. And you know what? Everyone wants to get jokes off on Caleb Love for slipping at the end, blah, blah, blah. Caleb Love went shot for shot with him, or vice versa, however you want to talk about it. Those were two amazing guards going head to head, shot for shot, punch for punch. It was amazing. But Jalen Wells, have yourself a game, young man. Isaac Jones had 16. There was a stretch, Taylor. I think it was 3 or 4 possessions in a row. Kyle Smith was just like, give him the ball, give him the ball, give him the ball. And he could not be stopped. Isaac Jones was tormenting the front line. Most specifically, I think it was Mo Krivas who was he was giving hell to. And so we talk about Kyle Smith and his nerd ball, and we talked to Coach Harden about that. But he's also smart enough to be like, Isaac Jones is killing these dudes. We don't need to run offense. Get the ball over half court, get it to him on the elbow, and let Isaac Jones go crazy. And he did for a good stretch of the game. But Ruben Chinyelu, I can't get enough of how well he played. Freshman outscored his average with 12. He had 11 rebounds, double-double. That might have been the game of his career. And you know what? Oscar Clough, Ruben Chinyelu, those are guys, and Miles Rice, who didn't necessarily have the greatest game, which is actually impressive for Wazzu. Their amazing point guard didn't have the best game, but everyone picked him up. And Taylor, what I think it speaks to Kyle Smith, but it speaks to their identity and their toughness is like, I'm going to pose this question to folks listening who may not know about Wazzu too much. You know where these kids are from? Like, do you know where these kids are from? We got Oscar Clough coming over from Australia. We got Jalen Wells, who is at Sonoma State, who I think was D2, and he's hitting shots in the McHale Center like nobody's business, right? I think Isaac Jones came over from Idaho. We got dudes from Wenatchee Valley, like Jeremy Harden. You don't know where these guys are, and that's okay because not everyone can pay 100% attention to teams and focus in on them. But the point that I'm making, outside of everything basketball related, Taylor, what makes them dangerous is they do not care because they're not supposed to be here. Those kids are not supposed to be hitting big time shots in McHale Center. Those kids are not supposed to be playing high D1 hoops in a major conference. Those kids are not supposed to be making the NCAA tournament. But alas, so like they're so inexperienced, Taylor, that it works in their favor in the sense of they're not getting their bright eyes, right? Come tournament time. I think they just do not give a damn. And that makes them a very, very dangerous ball club.
Well, and I don't, you hate to give people credit after a loss, but I think that ASU loss was like perfect for them. It showed them that, hey,
yes,
we can go into one of the top 10 difficult places to play in the country against a projected number 1 seed and win, but we have to play like that all the time, right? Even as bad as ASU's not bad.
That's a bad loss.
Yeah. No, it's a bad loss.
You cannot have that.
Right. But my point is that like they are not the worst team in the Pac-12, I guess. But the point is that anyone can beat them if you don't,
Sure.
put that intensity into it is the only point I'm making here, right? So I don't want to say that like I view them better almost because of that loss. I'm not sure that's what I'm saying, but I think for them internally, and we discussed this with Arizona. I think Arizona, this works well for them too, and you could see that response against Washington by Arizona as well to be like, because I think some of the other losses Arizona's had, Oregon State, Stanford,
Oh,
were kind of like they were fluky, like just way off nights that weren't. You could tell that this was not the normal team that was playing. This game was Arizona playing well, even though they had their second worst game offensively of the season. That was because of Washington State, not because of a fluky, just a bunch of makes. And why I know it's not fluky is because this was the second worst offensive performance of the season for Arizona. Their worst offensive performance of the season was at Washington State, which was also
yep.
a loss. So
Taylor,
that's what makes it not fluky to me.
every time we text, how annoying and obnoxious am I when we're struggling? I don't think I was this game
Very
because
is the answer. No,
I know I am. I know I am. Like
no,
during
you're not.
Stanford, during Oregon State, I'm just like, what the hell are they doing? This is so annoying. And I've tweeted like a teenager, basically saying I'm so annoyed with the Stanford loss. Which I am. I talked about it too. That should never happen. But this game, Taylor, I was just like, I mean, it's a rock fight. I was just like, this is Wazoo. And everyone was just like, I don't know. I saw a lot of tweets basically just saying, like, oh, Arizona can't get up and down. If they just did this, I'm like, yeah, if they could just do that, like they're not playing some bum ass team. They're playing a ranked, clearly I still think Wazoo's the second best team in the conference, but like this was not a fluke. This did not send me over the edge. I didn't want to do a cannonball into Lake Michigan because of this loss. I just had a lot of respect for Washington State.
It was
Yeah.
really funny to watch College Game Day on Saturday morning because the crew that doesn't actually watch basketball. They were, let me bang on Jay Billis again for the second time on this episode. Was him and Greenberg were like, oh, the likely winners of the Pac-12, Washington State. Yeah, they're gonna walk to the title. They literally, like, these were words they actually said, and I'm like, have you guys not ever watched Pac-12 basketball like ever before? Like, we know that there's so much randomness to this, and you know, I'm not saying that. Like we can't even say that about Arizona. We still
Yeah.
got 4 games left here, So it's just kind of funny that of all teams they pick, well, yeah, Wazoo, the likely winner of the Pac-12. I'm like, all they need to do is lose one time, and they're not the likely winner, So, that being said, Wazoo's only got 3 games left on the schedule. Washington being one of them, and then the LA schools all in Pullman. So, I mean, they should, knock on wood, let me act like one of those guys now. Finish the season 3-0. So Arizona can't. They have to win out. Arizona has to win out
Yes.
to win a conference at this point, and because I think Wazoo will win out and will finish second in the conference. So I would love to see you run it back for a third time in Vegas.
Oh yeah.
I think that would be awesome. I don't want to see Arizona. I don't even give a shit about UCLA, or any of the kind of our Arizona's like traditional, like, oh, I want to see it one more time. Like, I don't care. Let's give me the 2 best teams, which are Arizona and Wazoo. They're clearly the 2 best teams in the Pac-12. Let's run it back for a third time. Arizona's now lost 3 of their last 4 against Wazoo. And that's and both of Arizona's last 2 home losses, I believe, were to Wazoo. So, impressive stuff they're doing there in the Blues.
What? Tommy's got 3 home losses in his entire tenure. 1 to ASU on a 3/4 heave, and 2 to Wazoo. Is there another one?
Yeah, right. No, never to like UCLA.
Crazy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but it is funny how Arizona did get lucky this weekend, and you could say that UConn got lucky and Purdue got lucky. Not lucky in their performances, but in the fact that they all lost, and nobody wants to separate themselves. Houston did, but Houston again was a free throw away from losing. Right? Tennessee, at least they
took care of business.
They played probably the 3 worst teams on their schedule over the last course of a couple of weeks. And I will say this, Arizona is still projected as a 1 seed right now. Arizona, I think, has to win out to maintain that. Now, the only team I can see them passing at this point, if Arizona does win out, let's just say for argument's sake, Arizona wins out. Because those other 3, to me, are already, it doesn't matter what happens. Unless UConn, Purdue, or Houston loses 3 games. The 4th number 1 seed is the only one that's really up for grabs in my mind. Tennessee plays Tennessee's last 4 games of the year.
They got
Have you
like
looked at that?
Kentucky, Bama, right?
Yeah, they have all their ranked opponents to end the season. So
Yeah,
if Kentucky can go, or if Tennessee can go undefeated in that stretch, then by
they're
all
the one.
means, have the
Give
one.
it to 'em.
I
They
go
deserve it.
go right ahead. Yeah, no, totally. I'm still not vibing with North Carolina. I'm still not feeling it.
No,
I know that.
yeah,
And even though they beat Virginia, like it wasn't pretty, and I'm not. This is time of the year where when there is this debate, you do kind of need some style points. Scoring 54 points in a kind of a struggle game is not going to convince me, even though it's on the road, is not going to convince me you're better than a Tennessee or an Arizona or whatever. Even though Arizona did lose at home, I get that. But I think it's Tennessee
ranked
at this
opponent.
point. Yeah, but Tennessee at this point has the most to gain by their last schedule, their last
Yes,
4 or 5 games of the season by far. I
they've
think more than
never.
any other
Yeah,
team in the
they've
country.
they've never been they've never been a number one overall seed, or not overall seed, but they've never been a number one seed, which is crazy. But I think they can absolutely do that if they get through it, which is a gauntlet for sure. But I'd be happy to give them the one as long as we're in the West, man. That's all I really care about.
Do you like if you're a Tennessee fan? Do you like that you're ending the year like this? Like, I mean, do you think it's going to give your
No,
team
I don't think they care.
okay, yeah, I
Like
get
they're at the
Auburn.
point where they want to go win NCAA tournament games. That they know they're good enough. I don't think this stretch tells them how they're gonna they should feel either way, or like a rational
Sure.
fan should not take everything away from this 4 game stretch.
So it's Auburn at home, at Alabama, at South Carolina. That will be an interesting one to determine how good South Carolina is, I think, by the end of the year. But boy, that last game in Thompson Bowling against Kentucky to end the year on March 9th, that's going to be I
I
don't even care where they're going to be ranked at that time. That's just going to be an awesome way to end the year right there.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be a great game to look forward to.
Yep. All right, Taylor, let's get out of here on some segments, wrapping it on up. Damel Dimes. All right. Last week we went
Ugh.
0-3.
Oh God.
Unfortunately. Yeah, we are sitting now at 500, 24 and 3. Last week did not help. These very Vols did not cover 13 against Missouri. San Diego State, you took +3 against Utah State, and I think they lost by 7 or so.
Mm-hmm.
Wisconsin -7 against Maryland did not hit. I think Wisconsin only won by like 5 or 4 or something like that.
Wisconsin
Ugly game, which you
sucks.
talked about.
I'm
Yeah, they're
so
awful.
tired of them. Like, even though they won that game, Maryland's terrible, and I can't believe that they could even stretch that out to more than a few points. So, yeah, that
Yeah.
was
Who you got this week, though?
frustrating. So, well, let's start with let's bet on some good teams. That's kind of what my thought is here this week. Is let's go with some good teams. Houston, speaking of them, the number 1 team in the country. They're taking on Cincinnati at home. They're at the Fertitta Center, excuse me. And they are 13.5-point favorites. I think they're just going to smoke Cincinnati. I know Cincinnati had a good stretch there for a little bit, but I think just like we talked about wake-up calls, there's no better wake-up call than eking out an overtime victory on the road, and kind of a great, not that they haven't had a great foundation, but a great foundation to kind of launch the rest of the year to be like, okay, we can beat a really good ranked opponent on the road, survive. So I think they're going to parlay that into a big win over Cincinnati. So that's Houston by 13.5 against Cincinnati. Now, a team that's kind of sneaky here, and I was very high on them in the preseason. I haven't checked their bracketology, so I'm not sure if they're even where they are at in this discussion. But how about Syracuse being 18-10 right now? I mean, maybe a little better than what was anticipated. They won by like 1 million, I think, on Saturday. Did they not? At one point, I think they were up like
I
43 to
forget who they played.
16. I know they were. I know it was
Oh, it was Notre Dame,
Boeheim
wasn't it?
Day or whatever. Yeah, and but
Yeah,
Notre Dame
they
sucks. I
beat
know,
Notre
but
Dame.
I mean, they smoked them. So, uh, Syracuse at home, only a 1-point favorite to Virginia Tech. I don't see much difference between these two teams. I think Syracuse is playing decently well right now, and I think they have at least a decent amount of talent, Judah Mintz, so on and so forth there. So I'm going to take Syracuse, only a 1-point favorite at home against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's, yeah, I can't even say Virginia Tech's not as good as Syracuse. They're just not as good as Syracuse at this point, I'm thinking. So I'm going Syracuse by a point is all against Virginia Tech at home. And then this one is going to be a big, I don't know, big. No, we're going to go big. It's going to be go a long way to see how I feel about this team. Kentucky going on the road to a pretty good Mississippi State team. Now Kentucky is 3-point underdogs, so essentially, for home court is 3 points. So they say. So essentially, it's an even matchup on a neutral court. I feel like Kentucky. I don't know. I just this is a gut one. I got no reasoning for this one other than I think that they can start to maybe run this out a little bit. They're the more talented team, that's for sure. But we can say that every single time Kentucky takes the court. That's generally not the discussion. But for some reason, this Kentucky being an underdog, at Mississippi State, caught my eye. So we're gonna take a little risk on this one. Mississippi State's a good basketball team. They both have the same record at 19-8, but I like this Kentucky +3. It's one of those situations we talk about all the time where you don't get all that many opportunities to bet on Kentucky as an underdog in normal years. And so I'm going to take advantage of that, even though that didn't work at all in my reasoning over the weekend. We're going to continue on that track because it's got to work at some point. So it's Kentucky +3, Syracuse -1, and Houston -13.5.
Got a good slate this upcoming weekend. Let's get back above 500. Before we do that, though, let's highlight some mid majors. What are we highlighting today, Taylor? Not so mid.
Can I change the name of the segment to even more mid?
Oh,
maybe.
So we're
How
going
about
the other way.
How about UMass? Fully
gosh.
committing to moving to the MAC. All sports
UMac.
starting in 2 years. Really interesting. I know that it's more than just about basketball, but I think if you're Frank Martin, friend of the program, Frank Martin, talk about a real opportunity to win this conference every single year. I mean, for a basketball perspective, certainly the moving down in conferences wouldn't be the number one thing you'd be looking for, but you gotta, if you're a coach of this program, you gotta swing it as a positive in some capacity to say, hey, it's our conference to lose now at this point. And that's how I would look at it if you were UMass. You're a Boston area guy, would know this way more than I do. What do you think about UMass to the MAC?
I think it sucks. And first of all, I don't know if it's their conference to win, by the way. Toledo's nasty. Toledo runs that conference with an iron fist every single year. And so Frank Martin's
they'd be
right
now they would be first in net in the MAC. UMass would.
UMass would?
Yeah,
okay.
I believe so.
I mean, UMass is having a good season. Yeah,
I know.
They dropped a tough one against St. Bonaventures, but I'm not saying that they're going to walk into the MAC and just automatically dominate it. Frank Martin's going to have to now go to Ohio every single year. I don't know. I hate this for UMass. They're following the football money, fine, but it just seems like it's the end of UMass basketball as we know it. I think Rothstein tweeted out something very poignant. Temple and UMass are no longer going to be in the A10, two of the flagship programs, or two programs that we think about when we think A10 hoops. It kind of sucks. I don't picture UMass as a MAC program, but with all this realignment, I suppose it is what it is. So hopefully UMass can win the A10 tournament. Look, the A10, everyone thought Dayton's some buzzsaw. They're still a game back of first place. Who's leading it? Richmond and someone else that I'm blanking on in the A10. I forget who's up there with Richmond, but it sucks. I don't like UMass to the MAC. I don't like it at all.
But if you're Frank, you got to swing it as a positive, though. We got to swing this as a positive somehow.
I think that's what he kept saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So even more mid is the name of that segment for me.
Yeah, it is a step down from the A10. You're not wrong. My not so mid, I'm going to go to the West Coast, Taylor. One of my favorite cities in America, San Diego. Am I going to talk about San Diego State? No. Am I going to talk about the Toreros? No. I'm going to talk about the UC San Diego Tritons. I'm sure you've heard about those other two teams, even the Toreros, by being adjacent to St. Mary's and Gonzaga in the WCC. But UC San Diego, the Tritons, are having a tremendous, tremendous season, and I want to give them their props. You've probably also heard of UC Irvine because they peek their heads into the tournament, I don't know, once every 2-3 years, it seems like. UC San Diego's tied at the top of the Big West with Irvine. The Tritons are 13-3 in conference, 19-9 overall. And folks, this is just their fourth year of being Division One. Eric Olin has done a tremendous job. So the first season they were 7-10. Next season they were 13-16. Next season they were 10-20. This year, huge meteoric jump at 19-19, and they're going to finish above 500. What stinks, Taylor, is if you noticed and heard me, fourth year, Division One. What does that mean? They are ineligible for the NCAA tournament, which absolutely stinks because I could certainly see them winning the Big West Conference title when tournament time comes, and we're going to have to miss out on them. 4 years is way too many years. I understand the purpose of and the spirit of the rule, but 4 years, man, for the love of God, I think we've seen enough teams that are, and you have to strike while the iron's hot with these types of seasons. Mid majors, low level mid majors like these guys, their best players are going to get poked. And so for them not be able to show what their talents are on the big stage, it really hurts. But for now, I'm going to shout out and highlight UC San Diego for the tremendous year that they're having. Bryce Pope hits a game tying shot, crazy three against UC Irvine to force overtime, and they win in overtime 92-88. Bryce Pope is an awesome name. And they're just super balanced. I love how balanced this team is. They have so many contributors from all over. So shout out to the Tritons of UC San Diego and just the city of San Diego. It's one of my favorites.
So it is especially dumb in today's world where there's no transfer rules at all at this point, that you're now setting these teams back even further because everyone else can just transfer freely year to year. And that was the point of not allowing a team to do it. Is like, oh, you could start a new school and then instantly get 10 transfers and go to the tournament. Well, now any team can do that. So why are we punishing the new schools to D1? Let me tell you a very quick story because we're running long here about my experience with the UCSD Tritons. Okay. When I was in high school, back when I was actually good at golf, I was just firing off emails like the summer of my junior to senior year just to see if I could get some to stick. You know, hey, interested in your golf program. I wasn't emailing like, you know, the actual high like major
Texas.
Yeah, right. I wasn't doing that by any means. But I was like, yeah, San Diego, UCSD, USD, Riverside, like all through that area, just any of that type of stuff, right? Well, I was just doing a copy and paste email, right? Say, hey, coach, whatever. Interested in Torero golf.
Oh, wrong one.
I never went and fixed the
Torero.
To Torero to Triton, and they were the only school that never emailed me back. So that's
that's a high school mistake, though, man.
It totally is. But it's so funny, even 16, 17 years later, whenever I see those two schools, I'm always like, damn it, you know, what could have been, you know. So,
I mean, this podcast probably wouldn't be.
I'd be on tour right
existing.
now. You know,
yeah, that's true.
Who would have known? But
you'd be prepping for the Masters.
If I was on tour right now, I want to have the house to myself tomorrow. So, you know, I mean, it's kind of a lot of give and take, you know.
Pluses and minuses, for sure. It is insane how many like SDSU, UC San Diego, and then just San Diego. Like, I'm sure Southern California people are like, no, it's very obvious what the difference is. I can tell you that people across the country, when they see 3 teams in the city of San Diego, they're going to be like, why the hell is there so many? That's 3 Division I teams in a relatively, I don't know, I shouldn't say small city, but I don't know. That's kind of crazy. Taylor, your lane violation.
My lane violation is Tennessee
Triton instead of Torero.
Yeah,
that's
right. No, it's
violation.
No, it's actually the Virginia Cavaliers offense. So I know that we bang on Virginia all the time about their offense, but they haven't put up 50 points in the last 3 games. And in today's version of college basketball, that's incredible. And I saw this tweeted today, and I thought it was so perfect. People that talked about the 2016 through 2021 Virginia, they tweeted about or thought about Virginia like how this team actually is. Like those teams were actually good offensively. They were just slow. This team is slow and bad offensively.
Yes.
Like those Virginia teams were obviously nasty, like number 1 seeds, won the national title, all that. You're not going to be awful offensively and win a national championship. They were just slow. So people used to hate on them, myself included, as if they were like, this was the actual skill level of their offense. So they aren't scoring 44, 47, 48 points because they're slow. They're slow and bad offensively. So that's my lane violation is, boy, I mean, imagine being a Virginia fan. I mean, obviously you probably wouldn't trade the last 10 years for almost anybody, maybe Villanova. That's about it, you know? But 44 points a game, it's just a rough thing to watch over and over and over again.
It's ugly. I've said it a million times in the last few years, but Virginia fans should feel so happy that they got their one, because if they didn't get their one, they would have arguably the most embarrassing NCAA tournament loss in history. And you've had so many dominant teams and you have nothing to show for it. That would be gut wrenching. And then you got to watch your offense do this. My other thought, I'm glad you brought that tweet up, because yeah, they were slow, but they also had dudes like Ty Jerome and Kyle Guy and DeAndre Hunter, who are NBA level guys. Jay Huff was in the NBA. Like, these are guys that have played NBA minutes. And so it's irresponsible to think of them as some terrible, terrible offense. My lane violation, Taylor, just hangovers in general. We talked about Washington State being hungover and losing to ASU. Creighton's another one, man. Creighton got a great win at home, and then they falter against St. John's. Now, to Creighton's credit, nobody was beating Rick Pitino in that all white suit. Nobody's beating St. John's when Steve Sharippa, Bobby Bacala is in the building. Nobody's beating St. John's when Tommy DeVito's agent is in the building. And all three of those things happen: Tommy DeVito's agent, Bobby Bacala, and the white suit. So I give respect to Creighton, or I give them a little bit of grace, and we already gave grace to Wazzu. But if you're a fan of those teams, I think especially Washington State, when you're like, what a win, this was huge, we're in the driver's seat for first place, and then you throw up a stinker like that, it really screws with folks' emotions. All right. And Creighton, you got your fans hyped up. And I think your fans know that you're not going to shoot as well as you did from three when they were unbelievable, but they were clearly the better team against the number one team in the nation. And then you go up against a struggling St. John's team and lose. So hangovers in general, no good. That's my lane violation. Taylor, get us out of here on an easy layup. What do you got?
Well, I'm going to stay on the Creighton trend. And that's Greg McDermott nearing a lifetime contract with Creighton, something that we kind of have discussed multiple times over the last 2 months about how he kind of underpaid, and undervalued, and cool to see this come to fruition, as it's been a topic of discussion between us on this podcast in pretty recent times. So shout out, easy layup. I don't think there's anyone in the country who dislikes Greg McDermott, right? And so for him to be able to stay there for as long as he wants at this point is a really cool opportunity, and something that he is certainly deserving of. So that's an easy layup in support of that.
Let's see pen to paper. But what did we say when Holtman got fired, when we were recording right after that? We were talking about how there's rumors about Greg McDermott, and you and I were just like, what?
Yeah, no. Yeah, clearly not going to happen now.
No. My lane, or excuse me, not lane violation, easy layup. A U.S. stamp is honoring John Wooden, and it was unveiled on UCLA's campus on Saturday with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Jamal Wilkes on hand to honor their coach, who guided the Bruins to a record 10 natties in the 60s and the 70s. So that's what I'm getting behind. John Wooden now on stamps, on postage. And so I would buy that if I was a UCLA fan. Just as a college basketball fan, I might buy it. I think it's funny. It seems as if Kareem and Jamal Wilkes are every other week going to some sort of ceremony, because they've been part of such great winning traditions, especially Kareem, not only with the Bruins, but also the Lakers, and also being part of some of the greatest teams ever. It's just funny. Every time I see them, they're either courtside or they're at some sort of ceremony. But hat tip, easy layup, the great legendary John Wooden now on some postage. He's getting a stamp. I think that's great. We're going to get on out of here. We got a great week of hoops. Taylor, like I said, we're round the bend. It's almost Jerome time, my friend. Thank you as always for listening. We'll catch you next time here on Theater and College Hoops.